Welcome back to A1 Storyteller. I'm your host, and today we're diving into a gripping tale that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Imagine a world where justice is not just served, but demanded, where courage stands tall against the might of corruption. This is a story of resilience, of standing up against a system when it fails you, and of the shocking revelations that can change everything. Get ready to witness how one woman's fight for justice unravels a scandal that shakes the very foundations of the law. So buckle up and let's dive into this incredible story. It was a typical evening in the bustling city of New Haven. The sun had just set, casting a warm glow over the streets. Sarah Thompson, a 35-year-old black woman, was driving home from work. She had just finished a long day at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. She was tired but content, thinking about the dinner she would prepare for her family. As she drove through a familiar neighborhood, she noticed a police car pull up behind her. She glanced in her rearview mirror and saw the flashing lights. Her heart sank. She had done nothing wrong, but she knew all too well how these situations could unfold. She pulled over to the side of the road and waited. Two officers, Officer Johnson and Officer Martinez, approached her car. They were both white and had a reputation for being overly aggressive. "Good evening, ma'am," Officer Johnson began, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Do you know why we pulled you over?" Sarah shook her head, trying to keep her voice steady. "No, officer, I wasn't speeding and I have all my documents with me." Officer Martinez leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "We were just conducting a random check. You see, we have to make sure everyone is following the rules." Sarah felt a wave of frustration. She knew this was a pretext, but she decided to cooperate. She handed over her license and registration. As Officer Johnson took her documents, Officer Martinez began to mock her. "You know, ma'am, we get a lot of people like you who think they can break the rules." Sarah tried to ignore the comments, but it was getting harder. She felt her anger rising, but she knew she had to stay calm. Officer Johnson returned with her documents and handed them back. "Everything seems to be in order, ma'am, but we're going to need to search your car." Sarah's eyes widened. "You have no reason to search my car. I haven't done anything wrong." Officer Martinez laughed. "Oh, come on. Just cooperate. It'll be quicker that way." Reluctantly, Sarah stepped out of her car. The officers began to search her vehicle, throwing her belongings onto the street. They laughed and made derogatory comments, completely disregarding her dignity. Sarah stood there, tears welling up in her eyes. She felt powerless, but she knew she had to stay strong. She thought of her husband, who was waiting for her at home. She couldn't let them see her break. As the officers continued to mock and destroy her belongings, Sarah's phone rang. She looked at the screen and saw her husband's name. She answered, her voice shaking. "Hi, honey, I'm sorry I'm running late. I got pulled over by the cops and they're searching my car." Her husband, Commissioner David Thompson, was the police commissioner of New Haven. He had been working late and was worried when she didn't answer his earlier calls. "Sarah, what's going on? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but these officers are being completely unreasonable. They're searching my car and making racist comments." David's blood boiled. He knew his wife was a good person and he knew the officers were out of line. "Stay calm, Sarah. I'll be right there." David hung up and immediately called the station. He was furious when he found out that Officers Johnson and Martinez were the ones involved. He knew their reputations, and he knew they had a history of misconduct. He rushed to the scene, his mind racing with thoughts of how he would handle the situation. When he arrived, he saw Sarah standing by her car, her belongings scattered around her. The officers were still there, laughing and making comments. "Commissioner Thompson," Officer Johnson said, trying to sound respectful. "We were just conducting a routine search." David walked up to them, his expression stern. "I see. And what reason did you have for searching my wife's car?" Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Sir, we had reasonable suspicion." David cut him off. "Reasonable suspicion? You had no reason to search her car. You know the rules, and you know better than to treat a citizen this way." The officers exchanged nervous glances. They knew they were in trouble, but they didn't expect the police commissioner to show up. David turned to Sarah. "Are you okay, honey?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm fine, David. Thank you for coming." David turned back to the officers. "You two are coming with me. We have a lot to discuss." Back at the station, David ordered an immediate investigation into the actions of Officers Johnson and Martinez. He knew he had to act swiftly to ensure justice was served. He called in his trusted colleague, Detective Emily Carter, to lead the investigation. Emily was known for her integrity and dedication to the job. She had a reputation for getting to the bottom of things, no matter how complicated they were. "Emily, I need you to look into this," David said, handing her the case file. "I want to know everything about these officers' actions. I want to know if this is the first time they've done something like this." Emily nodded, her expression serious. "I'll get right on it, Commissioner. We'll get to the truth." Over the next few days, Emily and her team conducted a thorough investigation. They interviewed witnesses, reviewed body camera footage, and dug into the officers' past records. What they found was shocking. It turned out that Officers Johnson and Martinez had a long history of misconduct. They had been involved in several incidents of excessive force, racial profiling, and even planting evidence. The department had covered up their actions multiple times, protecting them from accountability. Emily presented her findings to David. "Commissioner, we have enough evidence to charge these officers with multiple counts of misconduct. But there's more. We found evidence of a larger corruption scandal within the department." David's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Emily explained that there was a network of officers who were involved in illegal activities, including drug dealing and accepting bribes. They had been protected by a blue wall of silence where officers covered for each other to avoid getting caught. David knew he had to act quickly. He ordered the arrest of all officers involved in the scandal. The news spread like wildfire and the community was in shock. People couldn't believe that the very people who were supposed to protect them had been involved in such corruption. The arrests of the corrupt officers made headlines across the country. People were outraged and demanded justice. The department launched a full-scale investigation into the corruption scandal, and several high-ranking officers were also implicated. David knew that he had to make significant changes to restore trust in the department. He implemented new policies and procedures to ensure accountability and transparency. He also made sure that the officers involved in the scandal were prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Sarah, on the other hand, became a symbol of resilience and courage. Her story inspired many others to speak out against police brutality and corruption. She worked with community leaders to advocate for change and to ensure that no one else had to go through what she had. The community came together to support Sarah and her family. They organized rallies and events to raise awareness about the issues and to demand justice. The movement grew, and soon people from all over the city were joining in. The trial of the corrupt officers was a landmark event. It was the first time in the city's history that such a large-scale corruption scandal had been brought to light. The courtroom was packed with spectators, and the media covered the trial extensively. The prosecution presented a strong case, relying on the evidence gathered by Detective Emily Carter and her team. The defense tried to argue that the officers were just doing their jobs, but the evidence was overwhelming. One by one, the officers were found guilty of multiple counts of misconduct, corruption, and abuse of power. They were sentenced to prison, and the department was ordered to pay restitution to the victims of their actions. Sarah testified in the trial, recounting her experience in detail. Her testimony was powerful and moving, and it helped to secure the convictions of the officers. She became a symbol of justice, showing that one person's courage could make a difference. In the months that followed, the city of New Haven began to heal. The department underwent significant changes, and new leadership was brought in to ensure that the corruption was rooted out. Training programs were implemented to teach officers about cultural sensitivity and the importance of serving the community with integrity. Sarah and David continued to work together to advocate for change. They started a foundation to support victims of police brutality and to promote community policing. Their efforts helped to build bridges between the police and the community, fostering a sense of trust and cooperation. The movement that Sarah had inspired continued to grow, and it spread to other cities across the country. People began to demand accountability and justice, and the message was clear: no one is above the law. And that's the story of Sarah Thompson and her fight for justice. It's a story that reminds us of the power of courage and the importance of standing up against corruption. It's a story that shows that even in the darkest of times, light can break through. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to A1 Storyteller for more gripping tales. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the world of stories.